Good evening. Welcome to this town hall event. My name is Marius Johnson Malone. I'm the Deputy Director of Community-Based Studies for Better Together. I want to thank you for coming out tonight to learn more about the recommendations that our organization has put forward and have some of your questions answered. The format of tonight's program is I will give a brief presentation and then we'll take questions. I will have folks line up over here for the question portion of the evening. But before we begin, I want to just thank Genesis for allowing us to have our event here and you all for taking the time out to come and participate in this really important community conversation. So we'll take questions.
What's your name?
I said my name?
I didn't get your name.
Marius Johnson Malone. So we'll go ahead and get started. Start with why this project even exists and where we came from. And a great place to start for that is just understanding what the problems are that we have. So Better Together has been around since 2013, and I'll talk a little bit about our organizational history in a bit, but I think one of the important things that we found is there are a number of issues that we have here in the St. Louis region that are worth addressing. Number one, the government that we have is exceedingly expensive. So as a starting point, when I'm talking about the St. Louis region and the government, I'm specifically referring to St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and then the government's there. So St. Louis City itself, St. Louis County, the 88 municipalities within St. Louis County, and the 23 fire protection districts. When we started our work, we found that those governments spent $2.3 billion every year delivering services to municipality, to the residents in this region. What we found is when we looked at other regions, because we kept getting asked, well, that sounds like a lot of money, but I don't know what it means from a comparison standpoint. What we found is that when we looked at places like Indianapolis, we spent on a per capita basis over $750 million more than what other regions spend on similar services. When we looked at places like Louisville, it was over $1 billion more. And so what we have is very expensive. Despite that huge cost, we know that we have vast disparities in services. In some communities within St. Louis City or St. Louis County, you could have all the things you might desire from a local government. Free trash pickup, free tree trimming, great public services. Other places, we struggle to deliver even the most basic level of services, particularly around public safety. Some places don't have adequate policing, and I think one of the things we recognize is that some of these places that are struggling to deliver that most basic level of services are also places where the most vulnerable people among us live. We also saw this particularly play out in a robust way in our municipal court structure, where we had many communities over-relying on municipal court fines and fees as a way to fund their local governments. One of the other key features of what we have is just a strong and unhealthy internal competition among our governments. Rather than spending our resources competing with Chicago or Kansas City or Nashville, we oftentimes compete against one another here within the St. Louis region. And that renders us really, it takes away a lot of resources and comes with some negative side effects. We often incentivize economic development by shifting jobs around the region rather than growing the economic pie. In the background of all of this, we continue to see population decline in both St. Louis City and in St. Louis County. The 2010 census was the first time that St. Louis County showed a loss in population in its history. And most recent census estimates show that trend will continue in the next census. So in effect, we are paying for more money for the same services to fewer people. You know, I mentioned that when we started our studies, we found that this government spent $2.3 billion every year on these services. That was in 2013. 3 years later, that cost had increased by $119 million, and we now spend over $2.5 billion annually on those government services. We also have an inability to have a collective action as a region. So anytime we want to pursue an economic development opportunity, or we want to address one of our regional problems like health disparities among our black and white residents in St. Louis, we recognize that we don't have any, from a structural standpoint, regional leadership. The mayor doesn't answer to the county executive and vice versa. None of the municipal mayors necessarily answer to one another or to the county executive. And so we don't have a structural leader that can say, this is a vision for St. Louis and this is the direction we want to go and how we want to do it. We're often rendered reactive to opportunity and challenges rather than proactive about addressing our issues locally. We've seen, as I mentioned, that growth in spending, but we've also seen tremendous increases in taxes as well. Since April 2012, we've had over 130 local tax increases in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. That's not including other governments like school districts and other things, but that is really something that is unsustainable. So per resident costs continue to increase in this region. We live in a system that's set up to fail. One of the things I like to point out is that this structure did not come about overnight. It's not as if someone designed St. Louis, I think, in this way. I think most of us would agree that if you were starting from scratch, this is not how you would design a region. And because of that, it's not necessarily the fault of any elected official or any municipal mayor. They're doing the jobs in their communities. They're doing the best to provide services to their residents. But when you look at the whole and at the region, we recognize that the system is not set up to succeed in the 21st century. So among that system, we have 55 police departments, 78 municipal courts, 88 municipalities, and over 200 special taxing districts. St. Louis needs to change if we're going to be our best selves moving forward. So just from a background standpoint, to give you a little context as to where our organization came from and what our process has been, we started, as I mentioned earlier, in late 2013. And we were formed as an organization because there were some folks in the region, civic leaders, who were interested in seeing what could be done about the divide between St. Louis City and St. Louis County and the fragmentation in this region. What they quickly found was that there was really little to no data to inform that conversation. So we as a region said, we didn't know necessarily what the spending was for all these governments. We didn't know how many police departments there were, how many municipal courts there were. There was no central source to offer that data to even inform how we might want to move forward as a region. So our organization was set up to do that work. We started by looking at 6 different areas of local government services: public finance, economic development, public safety, public health, parks and recreation, and general administration. Just trying to answer some basic questions. How do we currently deliver that service as a region today? And how do we stack up to best practices in delivering that service, whether that be best practices found locally or national best practices? From there, we sought to understand what are the common themes across those different service areas. I'll also state that one of the things that we found was really important for our work from the beginning was that the community was involved in this process at every step of the way. So you may have noticed that my title is Deputy Director of Community-Based Studies, a pretty convoluted title. But I think the key part for that, in my mind, is the community-based studies. So for each of those studies that I talked about, we tried to not just gather the data from the governments, but try to understand what is the experience of the people who interact with these governments on a daily basis. So for economic development, for instance, we know we have 90 different ways of licensing a business, but what does it mean not just from a standpoint of documenting those processes, but what is the experience like for a small business owner trying to start their business in one part of the region versus another part of the region, or if you have multiple locations or a mobile business, what is that experience like for those folks? And paired that qualitative information with the quantitative in each of our studies. We also found, so at the end of that process, we took a step back and tried to understand what has this process been like since we began. That's when we found that our spending had continued to increase, our population was continuing to decline as a region, and this trend was going to continue unless something was going to be done in this region. So we also recognize that St. Louis has a long history of documenting its problems and doing studies that often don't go very far. And we wanted to make sure that this time was different for us because the stakes were so high for us to succeed as a region moving forward. So we formed a task force of citizens to help us guide us through a process that could continue to engage the community, understand what is it that people in this region value about what we have today, what is it that they think that should be done differently, are there service areas they think should be considered for reorganization, are there things they absolutely didn't want to have considered for reorganization, and how do we think about proposing a new structure of government for this region. So they spent 18 months gathering input from folks, looking at best practices and lessons learned from around the country and from regions that had gone through similar processes to understand what were their success points, what were their points of failure, and how can we craft something that was unique to the starting point and the needs of the St. Louis community. From that, they released a set of recommendations earlier this year that I'm sure many of you have read about. So what did we learn? There were 4 key principles that emerged from their process. Number 1, folks wanted to see a unified voice for economic development. They thought it was really important that we stopped with the internal competition, that we all acted as one St. Louis when we were seeking opportunities for this region so that we could be on a level footing with our peer regions and have the best chance of putting our best foot forward, excuse me. They wanted to see a unified approach to public safety, particularly around economic development, particularly around municipal courts and policing. For a lot of people, they recognized that what they had was working well, but that in parts of this region, it couldn't work well from a structural standpoint, and that was unjust, and they wanted to make sure that we could do something about that moving forward. They wanted to see a more efficient use of their tax dollars. So if we're overspending by this much, how can we ensure that we are no longer going to be subject to that kind of overspend as a region, and that we are not continuing to grow the spending at the rate that we've seen in the recent history locally? And lastly, one of the things that we heard, regardless of where we went, whether it was here in South County, it was in North County, West County, and the city of St. Louis, people wanted to see the cultural identities of their communities maintained. People, you may not love your municipal court or have any relationship to that, but you sure do appreciate your farmer's market, your 4th of July parade, the things that make your community uniquely yours. And people wanted to make sure that whatever changes were considered, those things could be a critical part that stayed a part of their community. So with that, their recommendations proposed a new form of government for St. Louis City and St. Louis County. We're going to watch a very short video here, just giving a brief overview. A St. Louis metro city would unite the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County into one metro city, creating a new government to replace what is currently 2 county governments. We would have one metro city government with a metro mayor and a 33-member metro council. A united voice to address regional economic planning and development, better equipping us to create jobs for the people who live here and the people who want to live here. Consolidated human services, allowing us to better address the health, housing, economic, and safety needs of residents. One professional police department, municipal court, and metro city prosecutor, uniting efforts to address public safety and eliminating waste that harms our community. Preserving the neighborhood and municipal identities that many of us grew up with. So as the video mentioned, and hopefully you all got brochures as you walked in that walks through a little bit more of the actual structure. But this new form of government for the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County would have one professional police department, raising the standard for the whole region, one professional court system for our municipalities and the municipal court violations, one elected metro prosecutor, an elected metro assessor, and an elected metro mayor with a 33-member metro council. So those are the key components of this new structure of government. From a timeline perspective, if this was all successful, what we would have is a vote in November of 2020. In January of 2021, we would begin a 2-year transition process to get from where we are today to where we would like to be with this new structure. That process is led by the heads of the 2 combining counties, St. Louis County Mayor, or St. Louis County Executive and St. Louis City Mayor. They would begin the consolidating the departments and services across the region. They would also, during that time, be selecting a demographer or a nonpartisan expert to draw the district lines for the new Metro Council. The first elections for that Metro Council would be in November of 2022, as well as for the prosecutor and the mayor and the assessor. And then the full government transition would be done by January 2023. So with that, I want to pause and answer some of your questions. What I want to do for the question segment is I want to request that folks line up over here so we can make sure to have the mic and that everyone can hear your questions. I also want to make sure we obviously have a lot of folks in the room and a lot of people want to ask their questions, and I'm going to get to as many as we can. I ask that you limit yourself to 2 minutes maximum for your question. You obviously don't have to take the full 2 minutes, but we want to get to as many folks as we possibly can. So we did have some questions submitted ahead of time, so if we want to ask one of those while folks get lined up, we can do that.
Hi, everybody. This question comes from John in Oakville. Actually, it's 3 parts. 1, why require a statewide vote? 2, what will happen to the police coverage locally? And 3, how will the city debt problem be contained to the city?
So that's 3 questions. The first one, the statewide vote piece. So there is where we are from a structural standpoint with St. Louis City and St. Louis County is actually in the Missouri Constitution, so it necessarily requires a constitutional change. The regular way to amend the Constitution is through a statewide vote. There is a sort of carve-out process called a Board of Freeholders that allows for a limited number of things to be done with only a local vote, but the Board of Freeholders process is subject to general laws of the state of Missouri, so it doesn't have the same power as a normal constitutional amendment. There is, for instance, a general law that says you, as a municipality in Missouri with 400 or more residents, have to have either a police department or contract with the police department. So one of the things we heard very clearly from folks is they wanted to see a more unified approach to policing and municipal courts. That would not be able to be done through a local vote. The second question was about police coverage.
Yes. What will happen to the police coverage locally?
Police coverage, that's definitely going to be up to the police leadership. So obviously there are 55 police departments today. There would become one department over time. That would not happen overnight. It would be at the discretion of whoever would be the Metro Police Chief as to when each individual area would become folded into the new department. And then coverage as it is today is determined by those police professionals. And then lastly,
And then the last question again was, how will the city debt problem be contained to the city?
yeah, so one of the key features one of the key things that we heard from folks when we talked about potentially changing what St. Louis looked like was that whatever it looked like, they wanted to make sure it was not a bailout of anyone, but in particular of the city of St. Louis. So there's what is currently the city of St. Louis would become what is a municipal corporation. It's called a municipal corporation. So all of the debt and liabilities that currently reside in the city of St. Louis or in any other municipality, whether that be Maryland Heights or Hazelwood or wherever, would stay with that municipality, as well as the revenue to pay down that debt, so that no debt from any currently existing municipality would be transferred to the citizens of another place. So, thanks. We'll go to the questions.
Hi, my name is Rick Forshaw. I'm a business owner and resident of St. Louis County. I own both commercial and residential property, but I understand that any unencumbered real estate that is owned by the municipalities, i.e. that is property without debt on it, will be transferred to the new metro city. I've sort of verified this with 2 financial people and 2 municipalities. My questions are, why would that be happening? And what happens to the encumbered property once the debt is paid off? And what's to prevent the metro city from selling off these properties after they gain the deeded control of them?
So I think that's partially incorrect from what I understand. The determining factors to who will retain ownership of that property will be whether that it's related to a service that is a municipal district service or a general service for the region. So for instance, if we're talking about policing, where we know that is going to be a metro city service that's a general service provided by the regional government, those properties could be used by the metro city. But if it's something, a municipal park or something like that, that would be staying with the municipal district.
I don't think that's what the documentation says from what I've read, and that's not what the municipal leadership is saying. So I think that's something that your group needs to really come clean on. What does that mean?
Okay.
And I don't think it's clear.
Okay, I will seek further clarification, but that's my understanding of that issue, so thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dirk Stringer. I live here in Oakville, unincorporated. You had said earlier that we don't have a regional way of going after economic development and projects, but I thought that's what EastWest Gateway did for the region. And then my second question was, real quickly, you were saying that you did an urban analysis. Was there anything done to look at what would happen to property values in the municipalities in the county as a result of this?
So to the first question about EastWest Gateway, that's actually not EastWest Gateway's function. They are a quasi-governmental agency that covers actually the broader St. Louis region and has representatives from both sides of the river. But their role isn't to pursue economic development for the region. That's not really what they do. I think they have a strong role in some of the transit work that happens in the region, but that's not their purpose, from my understanding.
I used to be a part of them. They do a lot more than that. And part of it's economic, part of its government grants and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Aside from my understanding, which may or may not be correct, I don't want to, but I also recognize that even within EastWest Gateway, we have struggles between Clayton and Chesterfield, or the St. Louis City and St. Louis County, as far as trying to determine who's going to become the quote-unquote winner in any individual decision around economic development. And one of the things that we do is oftentimes offer incentives for development that probably otherwise wouldn't be needed, except to make sure that our neighbor doesn't get that incentive. And so things like EastWest Gateway, while they're great regional assets for us, don't really get at the heart of some of the problems that we've seen and some of the problems that they've identified, particularly around certain tools like TIF. To your second question, can you repeat that again really briefly?
Yeah, when you were doing your analysis of what impact this would have, did they look at how it would affect property values in county municipalities?
Yeah, so it's unclear. I mean, there's not really research out there like that, but I don't know is the answer to you. I mean, other places have seen positive growth after their consolidations, but there's nothing on that specific piece that we have as a part of our research.
I think a lot of people would want to see that. It seems like some kind of study that could be done.
Well, can you make a note to see what we have and then follow up with this gentleman? Yeah. Hi.
How you doing? My name is Gino Iberg. I've lived in Oakville, which is a township south of here, since our family's been here since '62. The last time we had a major disagreement was going on is they were trying to put trash transfer down our throat, because this tiny road that I delivered to for 20 plus years, and they made it sound like, well, it was just going to be the end all be all, we had to take it. Well, we decided to go to Clayton, and many residents fought that. So we didn't believe it then. So how do we believe now when you say that there's these people? We don't hear any names. You said people wanted to have this on your speech, and how do we know these people are? They weren't me. It wasn't me, and I don't think it was a lot of people here. I could be wrong. And also my other question is, I was an original trustee in our subdivision. We have a small subdivision. We have to take care of all of our own stuff. When the county came in with their trash deal years ago, we opted out because we didn't trust what they were doing. We want to do it ourselves. It says in your brochure there that all little organizations, like that, my understanding is, can keep the same way they've had it as they go along. So there wouldn't be the betterment wouldn't say you have to have this, you have to have that in your little neighborhood. If that's true, can we believe that like we did Prop A and Puppy Mills and other things we voted for? Or is this all going to change later on too? That's just my question.
So I want to make sure I understand your question. The first, there's two questions there I think I heard. One is, who are the folks who participated in this work?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
Sorry. A little bit under the weather and not doing it. Well, anyway. Who were the folks who participated in the studies? We've spoken to over 10,000 people over the last 6 years, but if you go to our report on our website, our full report, and not the brochure, bettertogetherstl.com, in the appendix there is actually a breakdown of, it doesn't have names, but there's documentation from our public feedback. And so there were town halls for the individual studies leading up to the task force. There were 7 town halls for the task force, and then also online surveys from over 1,200 folks on that venue as well. So, there was one here at this location. To your second question, how can we believe in anything? I wasn't a part of those efforts that you mentioned. I think that's the same role that citizens have to play in everything. It's continue to hold their elected officials accountable to what they said they would do. I mean, that's often a frustrating part, but it is an essential part of democracy that I think holds true to whatever things that we are talking about as a region, whether it be from the Puppy Mills thing that you mentioned, or any of the propositions or taxes that we have. It's incumbent on us to make sure that we're continuing to watch our elected officials and that they are accountable to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Your
I'm sorry,
brochure,
I forgot to do this. Will you just say your name? I think some folks have been doing it, but just make sure.
You need my
state your
serial
name.
number too, or just?
No, just your name.
Mark Ivancic.
Thank you.
Your brochure here talks about a projected cost savings, 4.9 billion by 2032. What will be the mechanism for returning those savings back to the taxpayers? Would it be tax reduction or rebate, or how are we going to get the money back?
So I'll address your question first and then add to it. One, there actually are tax cuts as a part of this. So as a part of this initiative, there would be a reduction of the St. Louis County property tax rate, just the one that goes to the general rate that goes to the county would be cut in half. So that would be for the entire region. So that's number one. And two is that there would be a phase out of the earnings tax. So if anyone lives or works in the city of St. Louis, that's part of it. And that phase out would happen over the course of 10 years. And two of those things were, so some of those things, particularly the first one, was directly related to what I suspect your concern is with regard to if we say that we're overspending and we're saying we're going to do something different and try to do something to correct that, we need to tangibly say this is how we're going to do it. Otherwise, the tendency would be to spend to our current levels in perpetuity or continue to grow spending. And so that we thought about that. That is part of the ways to address that.
So you only got two mechanisms. Reduction of earnings tax over 10 years and whatever, cutting the other one in
The
half.
other thing I was going to say is that savings of up to $4.9 billion over 10 years is a projection based on the current trajectory of our spending right now and what we think is reasonably able to be saved through attrition, through combining departments under this new government. Those decisions as far as what is actually going to be spent on a year-to-year basis will still rely and be subject to what the elected officials of this new government decide.
All right, so you can't make a commitment to it.
No.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael O'Brien. I live in Oakville. And, a lot of the pushback that I hear are, from the municipalities and how it might change the way those citizens are served. My question is, most, if not all of us, live in an unincorporated part of St. Louis County. And so I just thought maybe you could explain to us, what difference is this going to make for us, or what difference will we see? Is there something tangible that we can count on from day one, or how does that look moving forward?
So I think this, for folks living in unincorporated St. Louis County, it will largely be the same as it is today. That was in part some of the model and thinking around some of the services, recognizing that there can be great services delivered in unincorporated parts of St. Louis County. The other piece, and this is sort of related to the last gentleman's question, is on the tax relief on the property tax. So there will be tangible benefits on that front. But there's also services I think we will continue to see benefit from increased opportunity as we as a region are thriving and working better together as one. That benefits everyone in this region in a very tangible way. So I think, are there specific benefits beyond that to residents of unincorporated St. Louis County? Not that I am thinking of at the moment, but.
But more just maintaining the status quo then, is what you're saying?
From a service perspective, I think that's largely going to be the case, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here this evening. My name is Walter Bivens. I am a former school board member for 6 years in Melville School District and a former state representative for 8 years in South County as well. So I've represented most of these folks for some period of time. And some of the questions I have as the proposal was originally designed, it was going to, in my mind, not allow the voters of the area to vote on who the mayor would be. It was going to just happen. From what I understand, the same thing applied to the new council members. From what you have said, that seems to be different now, and I'm unsure what that difference is, so I wish you would reiterate what that difference is. The other thing that I think most of us are concerned about is how our tax dollars are are spent. And we're concerned, are our taxes going to go up on our property tax? Are our sales taxes going to go up? Are we going to have to pay a income tax like the city of St. Louis is currently paying? Or will those things, as far as we're concerned, be held harmless for some years so that we don't see significant increases in those taxes that we currently have to pay? I've got a whole list of questions that I could ask. I guess the other concern that I would ask you to address is how the commercial property tax revenues will be distributed through the new entity. Will they be held in the area that they're in now, or will they be distributed across the county? Will there be any benefits to the organization that I used to represent, the Melville School District, or for that matter, the fire district? Are they going to go up, going to go down, or will they be held harmless? So if you could respond to those questions, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, gladly. Your first question was
Regarding
about
the
the
election.
transition period and when folks are elected. So initially, the first Metro Council would be elected in November of 2022. And then there would be the first Metro Mayor and prosecutor and assessor elected in November of 2024.
Those will be contested elections?
Yes. Yeah, so there would be a primary that August, and then November would be the general election for
Okay.
those positions. And the thought behind that initial proposal was to help provide stability from what we have today to what we were going to. We heard loud and clear from folks that they wanted to have those elections sooner for all positions. And so all those positions will now be elected in November of 2022. So similarly, the primary in August of that year, and then the general election in 2022, November. So that hopefully that provides clarity on the first issue. The second question was about taxes and tax rates increasing. I actually think we anticipate tax rates decreasing. Obviously for the property taxes, that one tax level will decrease as a part of this. But then sales tax rates, as the special taxing districts phase out, those sales taxes will go away as well, unless the Metro City decided to renew those special taxing districts. So you'll see some sales taxes decline as well over time. The commercial property taxes, you asked whether they were going to stay in the jurisdiction. So there's really no change on that. So obviously there's a county rate, there's a municipal rate. The county rate will continue to go to the Metro City, or in the case of St. Louis City, will go to the Metro City. For municipalities, if they have a commercial property tax rate, they will still have those going to that municipality to provide services in their area.
So the
School
commercial taxes that we have in the area now would continue to go at the same rate to the fire district and the school district?
Absolutely. School districts and fire protection districts are unaffected by this at all. Their rates stay the same. They're left intact in their current forms.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to South County.
I've been before, but thank you for welcoming me again. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Curt Witzel. I actually served on the Melville School Board as well. Walt took my seat after I served 12 years, but I've lived in Oakville my whole life. Three questions. My wife and I were on a trip about 6 or 8 weeks ago, listened to the radio when your plan was first released. There was a gentleman named David Leibowitz, or
Dave Leipoltz, my colleague, yes,
who
sir.
was on the radio and spent an hour talking about the plan. At that point, people were calling in and saying, "Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we've worked on this plan for 6 years, 8 years, and we can't change it. It's being introduced tomorrow." Now we're on our third version of Better Together, the most recent one being the issue, I guess, that the county executive found himself in that made that change as far as who would be the new mayor one. Is this an ongoing process, or when will we see the final version if we're on the third now?
So it was obviously intended to be, this is the final version.
Okay.
That's the short of your, because from a timing standpoint, there's a number of things that have to happen statutorily with the initial
Yes.
petition that, and in order to be able to have time to collect the signatures, we're already sort of past where we should be on that time perspective. And so this is certainly the last.
Okay, so there won't be any more changes?
That's correct.
Even though people have ideas and whatnot, this is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This was sort of my city-county merger day today. I spent 2 hours driving to Jeff City this morning. I spent 3 hours in a Missouri House of Representatives general law hearing. I drove back 2 hours and I came right here. In that hearing room were about 90 people who spoke about the issue of whether or not the state should be voting on this or whether the city and the county should be voting on this. At one point, the chairman of that committee, Dean Plocker, asked it because they were packed and he limited the number of time that people could speak. He said, how many people are, after the fourth person spoke, in favor of just the city and the county voting on this? How many people are here for this? Every hand in the room went up. He said, how many people are against just the city and the county voting on this? Not a single hand. I guess you guys were not represented there this morning because that's the statewide vote was your deal. And I guess the thing that stuck out with me for that hearing, there was a Democratic state representative from St. Louis City named Tracy McCreary. And one of the things that she said, and I echo those feelings, is that she looked at the 168-page online. She said, I printed it all out, 168 pages of the Better Together thing. And she said it was not a report. It was basically a marketing tool. And that there were no details in there. She said, you throw around billions of dollars here. And, I looked at your brochure. I walked in, never seen it before. And I've been in marketing for 35 years. One of the things you say, as much as $44.9 billion in projected cost savings. So there's no guarantee any of these things. One of the things that she said is when you go online and you look at the report, or if you go onto your website, there's no details on how much the details of the financials that went into this. It's all sort of on a guess and we have to trust you. And that's a scary thing for people out here.
So I respect and understand that. I think from our perspective, the number one goal in trying to put any sort of financial projections there would be, there's two goals. Number one, and the first and primary one, would be to ensure that whatever structure is put in place is solvent. And that was really the best thing. And I think between our work, if there's a supplement that's not in that 168-page report that goes through some of the financials that shows very clearly this is solvent. And that's I think, the first priority.
Is that online?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
sir. It's on our website. The second, and then the auditor's fiscal note also stated that. The second thing would be to.
The state auditor basically said she
no,
couldn't
but up to,
confirm.
but up
She
to.
couldn't confirm, right?
Yeah. So it's important, I think, for us, as I mentioned to the other gentleman, that we're not the ones setting the budget on a year-by-year basis, so we couldn't say that in 2028, this is exactly what's going to be the savings. But we're saying, based on what we know is possible under this new government, these are what could be the savings. And that's why the vague language as far as much as and projected to be up to 4.9. I recognize it's unsatisfying, but our first goal was to ensure that this new government was solvent, and it is. And then beyond that is trying to understand what is possible from a savings perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dominic Peizo. I'm a retired city police sergeant, 35 years service. My question to you is, in I believe it was 2011, am I saying his name right, Seinfeld?
Rex Sinkfield, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I'll use Rex because it's easier to pronounce. Rex promised us, the city people of St. Louis, he passed a ballot initiative to have the city take over the St. Louis Police Department from state control.
In 2012, yes, sir.
That was sold to us in the city that was going to make cities safer, it was going to reduce the crime, it was going to be more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. Now you don't even have to have a high school education to be a St. Louis police officer anymore. You can have a GED You can be arrested and convicted of a misdemeanor and still get on the St. Louis Police Department. There are 150 officers down. They can't find enough people to want to come into the city and be a police officer. So if this was sold to us by Rex on the basis of being safer and better for everybody in the city, how come the crime is going up so bad? The carjackers are out of control, and you can't find enough guys who want to be police officers anymore. So if that's the case with that, why should we believe you that Better Together is going to improve our lives too? One more. How are these if, God forbid, this passes, how are they going to redraw the districts, the voting districts, and are they going to move Precourt and Wildwood into Spanish Lake and Bridgeton and Kinloch and Wellston? And how are they going to redraw this all?
I want to make sure. So, are you talking about the legislative districts or the police districts?
I'm sorry?
Are you speaking
No,
about
I could go on and on about the police department, but nobody probably wants to hear the rest of it. And certainly you ain't going to have the answers to it because I was already at a meeting, and we won't go there. But anyway, the voting districts or the districts, I was hearing on your plan that these, if it passes, you're going to be redrawing all the voting districts or...
So the current borders for municipalities remain the borders for the municipal districts that will exist. For the legislative districts for the Metro Council, during the transition, the mayor and the county executive jointly appoint a nonpartisan expert from one of the local universities or perhaps a group of experts to draw the lines for the legislative districts. They have to respect the Voting Rights Act and also the current political boundaries.
So who's going to redraw these? I mean, is it going to be a judge?
This
or is there going to be
nonpartisan expert. And then at the end of that, those districts have to be approved by the St. Louis County Council and the St. Louis Board of Aldermen.
Thank you.
Thank you. To your other question on the policing, obviously, I was not the one I didn't work on Prop A or local control campaign, but I think that's a complicated question as far as what is going on with the crime in the city of St. Louis. And part of the answer there is that obviously there's been a lot happening in St. Louis around policing, and there's a national trend around that's making it difficult for departments across the country to recruit quality police officers. So I'm absolutely sympathetic to that. One of the things we have right now is a structure where in St. Louis, we have 55 police departments with different hiring standards, different training standards, all these things. And while many of the departments are high quality, it's not necessarily their job to say, let's look at crime in the St. Louis region. It's let's keep crime out of my community. And so it's not necessarily addressing crime on a regional basis and looking at the data on a regional level. But I think under a unified department, we would have a stronger ability to address crime and the mobile nature of crime that we know and the way that it moves. So, okay. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Gary Julik. I live in Oakville. My question, I'll get to it in a moment, and I'll try to be brief. I see there's a line behind me. However, from my experience, whenever you're talking about a merger, the first thing that pops in my mind and the first thing that's discussed is when does it become accretive? And
when does it become, I'm sorry, what?
When it becomes accretive.
Can you say
accretive.
that? I'm unfamiliar with the word, okay.
It's an accounting term.
Okay.
But when does it produce profits? When does it produce income?
Understood.
Or becomes financially beneficial? The prior question, one of the prior questions, I think alluded to this as the 20 and 32 perhaps, or something like that. But it seems to me that's one of the most critical things when you're talking about a merger, and that's not being discussed here. But it occurred to me in giving this a little more thought. It really doesn't matter. And the debt level of the city, the fact that the per capita debt, according to my calculations, are 10 times that of the per capita debt of a county resident. The credit rating of the city of St. Louis was recently downgraded. It's lower than that of the county. If mergers were a panacea to If that was the solution for everything, wouldn't Chesterfield be talking about merging with Clayton? Wouldn't Kirkwood be talking about merging with Chesterfield? That's not happening. The city of St. Louis wants to merge with the county. In all the metrics, even the financial ones, it's somewhat irrelevant in my mind because it's the culture that exists in the city. When you look at the lack of corporate governance, when you look at the lack of fiscal responsibility as illustrated by the level of debt per person, and when you look at the crime. My question is, and I'm getting to it, what assurances do you have that this culture does not permeate and make its way into the new government? And as a reminder, it was the city that did break from the county in 1877 as part of the Great Divorce. And lastly, I wasn't going to bring this up, but the gentleman right before me had the question. And I think anecdotal stories tell more than what a lot of numbers do. It's kind of like a bank dealing with a borrower, and you're going to lend them money. It doesn't matter what the repayment capacity looks like. It doesn't matter what the collateral looks like. If the character of the borrower is not good, you're not going to get in bed with them. You're not going to do business with them. Anecdotally, I have a relative. Just a week or so ago, was parked on Lindell. The car was sitting still, got hit by a woman. The woman sideswiped. The woman did not have insurance, did not have a driver's license, and was not ticketed. And the police officer's comment, and I hope no one takes offense to this here, this was in the city, you'll never get any money out of her, and was not ticketed to his knowledge, let go. This is the kind of stuff that I don't want to be part of.
I completely understand your last point. That's happened to me twice in St. Louis County. It has. I've had a car totaled. I mean, so my point is that it's not as though that kind of issue is unique to St. Louis City. It's important that we recognize that these are human issues. Because someone is flawed doesn't matter where they're from. They've made a mistake. So I don't know if that's a fair characterization. I think to your broader point about the culture, and that's what I understood your question to be about, is the culture, and how do we ensure that that's not inflicted. You know, I think was a clear understanding from our task force as we were looking at this project and looking at this work, that what we have as a region isn't working, but in particular that I think many aspects of the current government in the city of St. Louis have not worked for bringing prosperity. So, you know, from a starting point of what this new government is, the initial charter for the new government is actually the charter of St. Louis County. It's a much more modern charter than what the city's is. And so, you know, the cultural thing is about who we elect and who these folks are and our ability to hold them accountable. There's no guarantee that you could isolate any culture from the new government, similar to how we operate in other cities. You know, there are places in larger cities that are unified where certain parts of it are prosperous and doing well, other parts are not. I anticipate that's going to be the same. I think one of the things that we are clear about is that this proposal and this effort is not offered as a panacea to fix all of the ills of this region. That's just not how anything works. There is no silver bullet that will change all of the problems that our region faces. But we know on this government structure standpoint that if we continue to do what we're doing, we're going to continue to see the same results that we see where we, particularly again, where we continue to have higher taxes and more taxes, and we continue to have population loss in both the city and the county. And we need to do something to change how we are if we're going to be different in the future. Yes, sir.
Hi, Larry Meyer. First, thanks for being here. I know it's not fun taking animosity questions all night long. I got a lot of questions. First off, I think anything that improves a locality has got to be better. I'm no historian, but I read in the last couple of years that at the time of the World's Fair in 1904, St. Louis was the largest municipality in the Midwest, including Chicago. So we've kind of lost our way in terms of keeping up with growth. One of the things I don't understand, you showed that map up there, and looked like St. Louis territory was about 20% of the whole county area. I'm being generous. I thought maybe it was even
Yeah,
closer
I'm trying to
10.
think. Yeah.
So we have 6 people running the whole county government as representatives. Why do we need 33 to add 10% more area?
It's a great question. That's a great question. It's actually something we thought a lot about, because our first inclination was to do something akin to what you're talking about, where we would just expand St. Louis County Council from the 7 that it is now to add 2 more and make it 9 for this new government. There were several factors that led us to not do that. Most of them are related to 2 primary driving factors. One is thinking about minority representation in this new government and what structures can help lead to a government or body that is representative of the constituents that live here. And what we found in the research and the experiences of other cities is that a larger legislative body allows for greater representation for those citizens. The other part of that was really based on some of the things that we heard from folks as we were going around and talking to people, is that they appreciated the closeness that they had with their elected officials. Obviously, the municipal districts will still exist, and their boards of aldermen and city councils will still exist, but with the municipal or the metro city providing more services, we wanted to make sure that those officials would be accessible. So 33 members at 33 districts gives you a district about the size of a state house district. And so there were a number of factors that went into that. A lot of them actually had to do with minority representation and political power, and making sure that we could maintain and not dilute that.
Come 2022, 2023, and it's obvious things aren't working the way people thought they were going to work. What's going to be the motive, or what's going to be the process for implementing changes?
I mean, I think it's the same changes, the same process as what we're doing now. Continue to have community conversations and see what we need to do.
So somebody's going to have to put up a proposal and put it on the ballot? Is that basically?
Or the legislature or someone else, yeah.
Okay. And one other thing, the whole question about finances, I don't know how the city gets their money now, and I don't know how the county gets the bulk of their money now, but there ought to be some way to address both sides and how it's going to look after it's together.
So we've done a little bit of that work. My colleague's actually done quite a bit of that work. And the reason that we haven't put that out yet, and we may still at some point, is because it is not beneficial. We don't want to handcuff the first elected officials for this new government. Ultimately, the decision's going to be up to us. And so we could say what we think it could cost, but it's speculative at this point.
Well, I'm more on the income side. Where's the money going to come from to fund, the government? Obviously,
so
I
from the
agree
same,
that you're going to probably save money with the new government structure.
From the same taxes that exist today, through the property taxes, through the sales taxes, utility taxes. The only one that doesn't continue on, the earnings tax will be phased out over a course of 10 years. And then, like I said, that property taxes for the general county property taxes cut in half.
Yeah. How are you going to get this in front of the young people? Everybody in here's got gray hair.
We hold a lot of meetings everywhere, but we value your opinion and your votes just as much as we value young folks.
They're the ones that are going to live with it more than us. By the time it gets implemented, a third of it.
Hi, I'm Glenda LaPiccolo, live in the Oakville area. You talk about the finances and the fire departments and how this is going to reduce everything. And the fire department, each district is separate, correct?
Yes.
However, the funding for those fire departments are going to the corporation, correct?
No.
No?
No.
Why does it say in the amendment that you can transfer people around between districts? It did in the original amendment.
For fire protection?
Yes.
I would have to look at that because I don't believe it. If it says that, I'm unfamiliar because fire districts are a separate entity and they're not covered under this.
There's a lot of information in the amendment on fire districts. A lot. And it talks about how the fire district, the City of St. Louis Fire District training, whatever is required for them is fine. How does that equate to Melville? Melville has a different training requirement. We have paramedic training.
Yes, ma'am. I think I understand your question. I'm sorry, I misunderstood it first. All the existing fire protection districts remain as is today. In the city of St. Louis, obviously, with the St. Louis city becoming a part of this metro city, the metro city is not going to deliver fire services, but the city of St. Louis still needs fire protection. So in its place, the current City of St. Louis Fire Department will become a fire protection district in the same way that any of the other fire protection districts exist.
And you talk about savings, but if you move somebody, because it also talks about moving people from the county to the city for working, regardless of where they are, and they'll have to pay earnings tax if they go to work in the city. And they'll be reimbursed, because it states that in the amendment.
Will be reimbursed, that's yes.
So how are they getting reimbursed? They can go to a lower paying job in the city for whatever function and keep their pay and benefits and retirement and everything, which I don't deny them that. But over here, you're reimbursing them. That money's got to come from somewhere.
So I think you're asking,
You're pulling money out of the air for salaries.
no,
Yes.
but it's money that they're not budgeting for in the first place because it's money that they hadn't previously received.
They're not previously receiving it, but the city is collecting it. The corporation is reimbursing it. So the corporation is getting the money from all the municipalities from the sales taxes and revenue. Correct? And you're cutting personal property taxes, general fund, of those people that pay that, because there are some municipalities don't have property tax, personal property tax.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused as to what you're asking. So you're asking about the earnings tax. So I think
I'm asking, I don't have the amendment in front of me.
Yes, ma'am.
But it states you have a full section on fire protection districts.
I think on the city of St. Louis, what will become the St. Louis Fire Protection District.
That is not clear in there.
Well, I apologize, but that's
Okay.
there's
That's
no other fire
not the
protection
way,
district
that's
is
not the
touched.
way I read it. If you're talking strictly the fire protection district for the city, not the metropolitan as a whole, yes, I do understand you're keeping the district separate.
Right.
But I do not understand the transfer of people that it talks about between the county and the city.
I think I'd have to see
how
what
that is going
so
to
here's what
work
I
with the output, the money output.
Here's what I think you're talking about, and there are obviously some services, fire is not one of them, that will be Metro City services. So there could presumably be a police officer or a public works person who doesn't live or work in the city of St. Louis right now that may end up part of their time is spent in the city of St. Louis. And so under other circumstances, they would have been subject to the earnings tax. That provision is there to ensure that they're not going to have to start paying the earnings tax just because they went to work for this new government.
Okay,
So that's what that reimbursement that you're talking about.
right.
And there shouldn't be transfers of others. But if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'd love to, because I want to make sure I understand your question, but I think
Okay.
we're sort of getting into the weeds here.
The obligations that they talk about in the amendment says none of those will cause that. You know,
Well, let's chat
corporation
afterwards.
is responsible for the application.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Celeste Witzel. I'm an Oakville resident. Does anybody in the room remember trash districting? Okay, this is going to be a lot worse. Okay. It's disappointing that some of the top leadership of Better Together is not present tonight, or at least I don't recognize some of them. But Basically, Washington University is pretty involved in this effort, and its chancellor is leading the effort. Recently, WashU hired a new chancellor. They did a search, and they chose their chancellor themselves. I guess my questions are rhetorical. How would WashU like it if the citizens of the country were mandated to choose their chancellor? If we, the voters across the country, were able to decide WashU's curriculum, its accreditation standards, its relationship with the community, its structure, its board of trustees, its donors, select the student body, people who are unaware of WashU in general, if the rest of us got to decide their business. Furthermore, how would WashU like it if the rest of us across the country mandated that they had to pay taxes? How would they like it if the voters across the country selected, as I said, its faculty, its administrators, its policies? What if people across the country were able to vote on decommissioning their private police force? So no police at WashU. The point that I'm making is that it's very unlikely that WashU would like any of these mandates in and of itself and on its governance. We in St. Louis don't like the BT mandates on ourselves and on our governance either, not only because of the dodgy BT proposal that seems to serve only an elite few, but because BT wants St. Louis's rights to be infringed on by voters across the entire state of Missouri who know very little about us. It would be just like voters across the country who would know very little about WashU making WashU's decisions. It's easy to dictate and to mandate from on high. For most of recorded history, people lived under different types of dictatorship, usually a form of autocracy, the rule of a single leader exercising unlimited power. If your BT plan is so great, then let it rise or fall on its own merits by the people who will be affected and governed by it, the residents of St. Louis County and City. Anything less is hypocritical and agenda-driven, not to mention cowardly, since WashU is forcing onto us that which they would not want forced onto themselves. We are surprised that such a stellar institution of higher learning has forgotten the section of the Declaration of Independence that states governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Thank you.
My name is Tom Conan, and I'm from Oakville also. There was a quote that no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. After this is, let's say, brought to fruition, what are some of the unintended consequences that I'm sure that you people have thought through?
Can you, I guess I don't understand the question.
After, well, you paint a rosy picture, a positive picture of better together. Talking to my neighbors, one of the comments I heard is, I'm moving to Franklin County. Will there be unintended, like I say, unintended consequences? And I'm sure that anytime there's change, people discuss this. What are our unintended consequences? And there's discussions go on like that, and I'd like to know if those type discussions happen. And will there be an exodus to surrounding counties? Yes.
I suppose I don't.
Outside of Indianapolis to the 4% inside the merged.
I think I understand your question. Those conversations, as far as unintended consequences, I mean, the nature of an unintended consequence is that it was not intentional. And so if there was something that we had foreseen, we would have tried to mitigate it against it in the proposal. I don't think there would be a mass exodus because I do think, I mean, if we didn't think this was going to be something that was going to be good for the region, good for the people who live here, we wouldn't be doing it. So I think that, I don't know how to respond, I suppose.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments. Hi.
My name is Jan LeVar, and I'm in unincorporated Afton. And I just have a couple of questions. Most of all have been addressed, but one of the ones that has been touched on, but we've not really been given an answer on, is it true that the statewide vote is needed because Better Together knows if it's left up to the city, county, it will not pass.
No.
That's not true. That's not true.
So you just asked me if something is true,
right.
and then you
Right,
reject my answer.
because you said no, but there's an article.
But I'm telling you that that's not true.
Okay, so,
We don't believe that.
okay.
Okay.
He
No,
said
go ahead.
no.
Go ahead.
There is an article out, and it's by a gentleman that is actually for the merger, but he said that he posed that question to Better Together, and they told him the reason it's being done statewide is because it is known that if it was just left up to us, we would vote it down.
Yeah, I don't, I know what article you're referring to, and I can tell you, after speaking with all of my team members, none of us spoke to that gentleman. So I don't know who his source is on that, but it's untrue.
Do a local vote and then take it to the state if it passes locally.
So, one, I want to make sure we're being respectful of the folks who are in line, but I will answer your question because that's one we get. The question was, why not do a local vote and then take it to the state? We looked at doing that. There's two things. There's one thing primarily that was the driving force behind that. And the reason was, I think there's a recognition, and sometimes this is lost in a lot of the conversation about this, that what we have today is not a benign structure for a lot of people living in this system, particularly when we look at areas of the municipal court where people's lives are being affected in a tremendously negative way on a day-to-day basis, particularly people of color and people of low income who have been caught up in these systems. Whether it was their fault for the initial offense or not, we know that this system is wreaking really terrible havoc on people's lives. They've lost jobs, homes, and other things. And so there's an urgency to this issue that I think is real. So
That would be addressed by changing the court system and mandating laws.
And we've tried to implement changes in the court system, and some of them have been moderately successful, while others we continue to see things happening and continue to see efforts by state actors to roll back those reforms as well.
Well, my next point is the work of designing the new government's charter and political map is going to be entrusted to leaders whom the proposal takes various steps to insulate from political checks. The plan to establish a budgeting scheme that privileges wealthy municipalities and affords the elected representatives disproportionate influence. That in and of itself is not going to benefit the disenfranchised populations that Better Together is claiming is going to be helped by this.
I guess I would have to have a more specific example of what you're referring to be able to respond, but I don't believe that to be true.
If you take money from the rich man and give it to the poor man, the rich man's not getting the benefit to the poor man is. That's what she's saying.
What this is a redistribution of wealth.
Okay. I disagree, but thank you.
Thanks.
I also want to say we are at 7:14 now. So I'll try and get to everyone else that's left in line, but then we'll have to end the evening because we're already going to be over time here.
I'm Gary Welker, a retired executive from Anheuser-Busch, spent 38 years there. And from what I see, the most important thing you can do to make anything work initiative is you get the right people on the bus. And I don't think we have the right people on the bus right now to make this initiative work. We got a county executive who's been investigated. It seems that we have a mayor of St. Louis who doesn't really take charge, I want to say, or done anything positive to reduce the crime rate. So I just don't think we have the right people on the bus to make it work. And the other thing is, anytime you do a merger, it's the value that's combining two together and to make it successful. And I do not see a value coming out of St. Louis City.
I think there are a lot of folks who would disagree with that sentiment, but I thank you for your remarks. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Sally Merkel, and I live in Oakville, and actually I'm a retired federal employee. And my son is currently active duty in the Navy, so go America. But anyway, you talk in one of your charts, you made a point of saying about that elected positions, electing the county council, and electing the new people, the metro council persons, and all the rest of them. However, everything in this plan sets it up right now that everything is, like the last gentleman said, is in the hands of the current county executive and the current mayor of St. Louis to appoint everyone that's putting the framework around this. They're appointing the college or college people, which I'm guessing is the WashU person from Better Together. They're appointing them to redraw the borders. They're appointing them to set that up. You said that's going to be a nonpartisan group that's going to set the borders, but that's partisan. It's the Democratic mayor of St. Louis and the Democratic councilman. How is that nonpartisan? I don't understand that. It's going to be appointed by them to draw the borders, okay? Then that'll determine who will be within those borders to pick those 33 people to represent us. Right now, we have a representative government. That's what the United States is all about, is being represented and having our vote count. And what this is trying to do is, number one, saying the people that you're going to govern are just a little tiny piece of the people get to vote on it. The majority of the people that get to vote on it aren't even a part of this group that are going to be affected by it, number one. And number two, you're going to have people that are going to set everything in place and put all the key players in place that we are not going to be able to elect. So they're going to handpick their people. The very thing that this federal investigation is going on right now about Stenger, of handpicking people, of whoever, I guess, contributes the most, whatever businesses got the most interest in this, to fill these parts, not for us to elect them. And that's what I have a problem with. This is a representative democracy in the United States, and we should have a vote in this every step of the way. And these should not be appointed people, and your little group should not be able to tell us who's going to govern us.
My name is Janet, and I'm not from Oakville. I'm from Afton. When I got in line, I had one question, and now my list has grown. When you started this group in secret, my question is, do any of you live in the area that's going to be affected by this, or do you live in the areas that are opted out?
Well, we didn't start it in secret. When we launched in 2013, we had a press conference that was widely covered. When we announced our task force in 2017, we had another press conference that was widely covered.
Now, I want to know where they live.
I was getting there. One of our task force members lives in Oakville.
All of you live in Oakville?
No, but one of them does.
Ooh, one. Okay.
There are 5. His name is Arindam Kaur.
And then the people that have started this, what do they plan to get out of this personally? It just seems like you're telling us what to do, but there must be something you're going to get out of this. And then my last question was, I was at a previous meeting for this, and we were told that the reason this has to be a statewide vote was because it's the Missouri Constitution says it has to be. Now, is that true or not?
I believe so. Let me take your questions in order. One, the people who started our organization, Ambassador Burt Walker was the first one who gave $100,000 to start this organization in 2013. And the other board members and others who have donated to this effort, you can visit our website, bettertogether.com.
I don't have.
Okay. Well, our donors are available there. But I think the thing that they get out of this is the same thing that they hope for everyone to get out of this, is a better St. Louis. But to your other question, the statewide vote piece is, as I mentioned earlier, the separation is in the state constitution, and so any change to that is a constitutional amendment. The way to do it through a local vote is not available to us through the recommendations because of the desire that we heard from people to consolidate the municipal courts and the police, and so that piece does require a statewide vote, yes.
I don't remember voting on anything for Kansas City.
I'm sorry, please. This is my life. This is my future. This is my family's longevity here. You keep telling us this has to be a statewide vote. People in Kansas City don't care about us. Why not put it to the people in this room right now with a show of hands, or put it to everybody, put it to everyone with a county vote? You can do that. Do it. And then if it doesn't, if it's not going to work, then don't do it. But if it's going to work, I'll sit down.
Respectfully, I want to make sure I get to these folks because I've already, and I think I've answered the question. I'm sorry that it's not to your satisfaction, but yes, sir.
My name is Roland Rhodes from South County. My question is, why is the center of government going to be located in downtown St. Louis as opposed to Clayton, for example?
So the government actually will, obviously there will be lots of departments and some of them will remain in Clayton, some of them will be in the city. The piece that will be downtown, if for no other reason because of the facility, is the legislative and the executive bodies. So they'll be where the Board of Aldermen meet. The county council can't accommodate that without new expenditures to expand that facility. But there will still be places in St. Louis County that have services and places all around the region will still be utilized.
What happens to Clayton is my question. There's a government center there.
Yeah, my answer is that I think those facilities will still be needed, particularly in the beginning, as we continue to deliver services across the region.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Councilman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So my name's Ernie Tracus. First, I want to thank you for coming tonight, answering questions. You and your folks demonstrating so much grace under pressure. I know it's not easy.
Appreciate that.
That said, I do have some questions that may be difficult, and but I think they need to be asked. Now, you've made some bold and ambitious representations tonight. $750 million in annual savings, lower real estate taxes, just to name two. You've professed that residents desire a unified voice for economic development. For many years, we've had a regional economic development partnership, which is now the subject of a federal investigation for possible corruption. Until Monday of this week, Better Together insisted that the current county executive, himself and his administration, subject to a subpoena in that same federal investigation, would be appointed mayor of the metro city without election. Hasn't Better Together lost any credibility it had, if any? Secondly, why should anyone here tonight or throughout the county put any trust in anything Better Together has to say about this plan, given this week's events? And then finally, if Better Together is so confident of the correctness of this plan, then you should also have the confidence to leave it to the city and county voters, the only ones directly impacted by its imposition, to decide if they want it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you can continue to have confidence in part because what we heard from people at meetings like this was specifically about the transition period and the election of not just the Metro Mayor, but the prosecutor and the assessor, was that people wanted to have those elections earlier. The substance of the plan has not changed. The transition period has changed, and so we still feel confident in the structure that is put forward. Thank you for your comments, sir. Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Doing well.
All right. My name is Mud. I'm not from Oakville.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
Mud.
Mud, okay.
I have just a couple questions, not statements. In general, how is this Better Together going to help with the growth of St. Louis in general, the metropolitan area? Because I can't remember the last time a major corporation was made in St. Louis. Not baseball parks or these little, government things, but but an actual corporation. Like getting Amazon to come here, these people need jobs. And without growth, without work, we're in trouble, brother. We've got to do that.
So I think there's two things that I would point to, and one is by having a more regional structure, a more unified structure of government, we can act as one unit to say, this is the direction we want to be. We want to focus on this industry and actually put regional resources around enhancing that and enhancing the development of our workforce locally. I think that's a key piece. The other part of this is thinking about not just those big companies like the Amazons and all of the other things, but the small businesses that exist here, and making things easier for those people trying to start and maintain a small business, whether that be from streamlining licensing so that we have one system across this region instead of 90, or ensuring that the adequate resources are there to help those people in the ways that they need.
Okay. But once they start getting taxed, these city earning taxes,
that's
if I'm going to make a big company, and I'm coming.
That's phasing out over 10 years.
Okay. What about in the county if I made something? I have to pay it.
No, the earning tax doesn't expand to the county.
If you don't have all this, we're saying you want to make a smaller business, correct? Rather than a larger corporation. Like AT&T came back to St. Louis from Texas. Because we've lost a lot of companies.
Right. I'm trying to, I don't understand what you're asking.
What I'm trying to say is that if we don't get our stuff together, we're going to be done with.
I think I generally agree with that. Yes, sir.
I don't care where anyone's from.
Sure.
We've got a lot more research to do on this before you can actually go to a vote.
Okay.
More research. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Ted Wilkinson. I'm a resident of St. Louis County, unincorporated, I think it is. The one gentleman had left, but he had asked a question, what are you going to do about millennials and getting them on board? I am just on the cusp of being outside of millennials, but that's why I'm here. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I believe that's the majority of the group that is in this room would also say, hey, what can I do? What can I do as a citizen? I love this region. I love the city. I love the county. What can I do to make sure my kids after college move back here, stay here, and grow their family here? And I think that's one of the reasons, motivations of why I'm here and listening. So I appreciate that of what you're doing here. The group also talks about the savings. And I think it really, I'm in procurement. I think it's the way to look at it is when someone says, how do I get that savings back? I think it's really needs to be defined as it's not money that you're going to get back, it's money that you're not spending. And that's how I look at it. And the other point I wanted to make too is real quick, someone was talking about how do we make sure that the crime doesn't come to the county? Do criminals today say, hey, there's the county line, I'm going to go do my crime over there versus over here? I don't believe so. I think criminals do not care about boundary lines to be able to move the crime here. So, but my question kind of goes back to why I'm here and talking about wanting to making sure that my kids have an environment that is good for them, that they want to come back here. And it's about the taxes for the sales tax. That this plan the sales tax would be under the 1 mayor and the 33 council members, correct?
Most of it, yes.
Okay, so how does the TIF program today, how does that, with the new plan of virtually giving tax breaks to companies or small businesses to be able to put a business in their particular municipality to where we can stop this competition of the Walmart being in Oakville or South County or Arnold or anything like that? Can you kind of explain just real briefly on how does the city council, the new 33 members, did they vote on, hey, we've got a Walmart within a 5-mile radius, we don't need another one a mile down the road? Kind of like how Shrewsbury fought through that.
Yeah, so the way that works is that zoning and planning are, TIF is actually obviously a specific tool, but zoning and planning are done through the Metro City. The municipal districts for the that are currently in the municipalities that will become municipal districts will serve as a planning commission or the board of adjustment to that metro city, so they'll make recommendations. But ultimately, it's the authority for offering any of those kinds of economic development incentives or making those changes lies with the Metro Council. So we do have a regional body looking to say, yes, there is blight here, and this tool is needed, versus it being based on the interest of a community to draw the tax dollars into their locality.
So the elected representatives will have to make their case for saying why it's important for that particular business to be in their municipality or their
Correct.
municipality. Okay.
Correct.
My last question, real quick, is you had mentioned, this was brand new for me, you were talking about the property taxes going down in the county. So when I'm reading recently that the assessor is saying that property values are going up, and I got someone knocking on my door saying, hey, your property tax is going to go up. So can you just expand on how my property tax is going to go down with the plan? I'm a bit unsure on that.
The tax rate. So obviously the assessment plays into it, but the rate for the taxation will be going down for that general county rate. Not for any municipalities, not for schools, fire protection, for that county rate will be going down.
Okay, very good. And I just also want to thank the men and women here from the law enforcement from being here to keep order and everything. I personally have a brother who is a police officer and a brother-in-law who is a federal agent as well. So we thank you for your service. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Gene Hutchins. I live in Afton. Very simple question, or let me present it this way. When it snows in Afton, within about a 12-hour period, if that long, the county blades off the streets and I'm able to go. Tomorrow, between 6 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my trash will be picked up and removed. The city of St. Louis does not remove snow from residential streets. The city of St. Louis does not reliably remove trash from its neighborhoods. Now, I will by default go into the city of St. Louis, this municipal metropolitan corporation. Why should I believe that you're going to give me the same level of services that St. Louis County presently gives me?
Well, the default from a structural standpoint is the county charter is the one that's governing. So it's not actually, the city's not taking over the county's not taking over, it's a new government, but.
Whoa. The way I read it, the way I read that initiative, you know, if I lived in Kirkwood, I'd be in a municipal district. I live in unincorporated St. Louis County. And that boundary goes away, so when this thing happens, if it happens, God forbid, I'll be in the city of St. Louis and under its aegis and its authority.
No, sir, that's not true. It's the city of St. Louis does not exist in its current form, and its place will be a municipal corporation to hold on to the debt, but the new government will be the metro city that is combined government of the two.
Since you're not going to reduce any of the head count or any of the people there, I'm still can rely on the people to take the snow off my streets and pick up my trash. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
The last one. Thank you very much for being here. I do not envy you what you have to listen to, but you know what? We never really have a chance to speak, you know, what we have seen and lived through in the St. Louis region. I grew up here, and you know, I know all the great places in St. Louis. My grandma lived in Tire Grove Park and went to church. I mean, everything, right? And then you see what it is now. This city did not come to this place overnight. You are bankrupt right now. I believe, what do you have, like a $1.2 billion or $1.6 billion in unfunded liabilities? Is that correct? Isn't something like that?
I don't believe it's that high, but it's.
I thought that's what I read, but I could be wrong.
I also want to make clear that I'm not a representative of the city, but continue.
Okay, well, as a person who is trying to put this all together,
yes, sir,
you better be aware of that, okay? So, I want to put this together in a larger context because this is a microcosm, you know, with real complications today placed in a soup of what's going on in this country. There has never been, in my opinion, such political discourse, the degradation, you know, of politics and goodwill between people, and through this past 10 years. And it's you see it all the time in fake news, you know, hateful rhetoric, you know, protests. We just had a Lincoln Days dinner last Saturday to celebrate Lincoln and, you know, Republican, you know, ideals. So what happens? We get tons of protesters out there rolling out bales of stuff, protesting because we had blessed Joseph Sheriff Arpaio showing up as being a speaker. I mean, this is the way business is conducted today, not in a normal dialogue, you know, kumbaya. That's what you're talking about, kumbaya. Suddenly, it's kumbaya. This should have been done 10 years ago, 20 years ago. The city didn't go down overnight. You had all this time to plan for it. You saw all the streets being gradually, you know, blocked off and houses torn down. And here we are today, suddenly, we have, how many? We still have 33 aldermen in the city, right?
28, but it's going to 14.
It was 33?
It's going to 14.
It was always 28? Okay.
They were supposed to cut it to 14 this year, but
Right.
they're going to bring all 28 next year.
Right, we have to gradually go down. Yes, that's right. We have through attrition.
It's reducing to 14 after the next census, yes.
Yeah, right. The Democrats, I'm sorry, have the Midas touch in reverse. And you have done this, you look around at all the major cities, this is the problems they face. And until you give up your governance, your so-called governance, the cronyism, you know, the double playing, you know, it's not going to work. You should do what Detroit did, the city should do, declare bankruptcy, get rid of the obligations, pare down the payroll, and get some really, I would even ask Walt Disney's company to come in and take a look at St. Louis. He was going to put up a Disney World here at one time. This guy is creative on how to do something with an environment. So my question is, why should we believe you now in this? I mean, all this stuff is fine. It's like, look at what's over here. The big picture is up here, and the discourse and the goodwill of people. And you don't have that of the people. And how do you get it? I don't know. But this is a late date to start on that agenda. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I want to say thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your questions. I know this conversation is filled with a lot of passion and a lot of strong opinions, and I hope that you leave tonight knowing more about this proposal than you did when you came in. What I want to encourage you to do is continue the conversation beyond tonight with your friends and neighbors. We visit our website, check out the full plan, bettertogetherstl.com. If you have additional questions, we have some organizers in the room. Jack's over here on my right, your left. Larry's in the back. We've got Will and Tina up here in the front. They will stick around and continue to answer your questions. Or if you have questions, you leave here tonight on the way home, you think you have another question, feel free to submit it on the website, and we will make sure that we get that there for you. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening, and for giving up part of your evening to join us. So thank you.